So today I will be talking about A Tale Dark and Grim by Adam Gidwitz and Trickster, Native American Tales, a graphic anthology by Matt Dembicki. So first, let's talk about Trickster. Meet the trickster, a crafty creature or being who disrupts the order of things, often humiliating others and sometimes himself in the process. Whether a coyote or rabbit, raccoon or raven, tricksters use cunning to get food, steal precious possessions, or simply cause mischief. In Trickster, the first graphic anthology of Native American trickster tales, more than 20 Native American tales are cleverly adapted into comic form. An inspired collaboration between Native writers and accomplished artists, these tales bring the trickster back into popular culture in vivid form. From an ego-driven social misstep in Coyote and the Pebbles to the hijinks of how Wildcat caught a turkey, and the hilarity of Rabbit Choctaw's Telltale, Trickster brings together Native American folklore and the world of graphic novels for the first time. So this book falls under the category of traditional fantasy. It's folklore, like I just read, and falls under the subcategory of trickster tales. This book has many elements of traditional fantasy. There's no known author because the story has been passed down generation over generation and were finally written down by Matt Dembicki and others. It has special fantastical characters like talking animals and tiny people. There is magic in some of the stories, like Pua Pua Lina Lina, the wizard dog of Wapio Valley. There's a lot of trickery. Many of the stories in the book teach how things came to be. For example, the tale, How the Alligator Got His Brown Scaly Skin, as well as stories that teach readers good values and morals. For example, when Coyote decided to get married, this story shows the reader that honesty is the best policy. Implicit and explicit themes can be found in each individual tale. There's not really one specific theme that can sum up the entire book because the tales vary. This book is culturally specific, meaning that the novel represents a specific culture in an accurate way. The graphic novel is a compilation of Native American folklore that has been handed down through the generations. Native American writers use their skills as writers to write the stories in a comic style and each collaborate with a different Native American artist to accurately create graphics to complement each story and help the reader understand and visualize them better. The culture of the Native Americans can greatly be seen in the stories themselves as well as the illustrations. This book is the winner of the ASAP Prize from the American Folklore Society in 2011. The award is given to folklore that accurately resembles the culture it is writing about. For my ELA artifact for a trickster, I chose to do a plot line of one of the tales in the compilation, and I chose Mao and the Birds. So first is the exposition. This story is set in a forest and in the desert, as you can see by the illustrations. The situation is that Mao has been wandering all over the earth trying to find something that would satisfy his wandering, because he is not satisfied at all with his life. So the characters are Mao, who is a coyote, yellow birds, and blue jays. So the protagonist is Mao, and the antagonists are the birds. So the conflict is that Mao is unsatisfied and wants to learn how to fly, like all the birds in the sky, because he can see them flying around, and he's very jealous of them. And the sky is also a place that he has never been, and he's trying to find something that will satisfy him, so maybe it's the sky. So then we come up to the rising action. So the birds at first ignore his pleading to asking them how to fly. But they soon grow tired of running away, and Mao persuades the youngest bird to teach him how to fly. The bird promises to give him only 3 lessons. The first lesson involves Mao climbing on top of a sage bush and jumping, but he fails and falls to the ground. Right there. So then the second lesson involves him climbing on top of a juniper tree. He decides that this time he will need to whirl his tail, like shown right here, to help him fly better. But he fails again and falls to the ground. So the third lesson involves him climbing to the top of a pinyon tree. And he decides that he needs feathers, which he uses the weeds of the branches, combined with his whirling tail to fly out correctly. He puts the dried weeds into his fur, then he jumps, and he actually does fly for a tad. He does some whirls and some flips, but then he hits the earth so hard that the birds think he's dead, and they wonder what they're going to do. But he ends up waking up, and he believes that his 4th time will be the charm, and this is when we reach the climax. He actually believes that this time he'll be able to fly. So once he reaches the top of a pine tree, he spots 2 blue jays tossing their eyeballs around, kind of gruesome and weird, but they catch them right back in their eyeball sockets. So he wants to do the same thing. So he tosses his eyeballs out, and he jumps. So the falling action is that Mao falls to the earth doing his tricks, and flips so he can show off to the watching birds. He has a rather rough landing, seen up here at the top, but he makes it. But his eyes were not as lucky. So the resolution is that Mao loses his eyes. The Blue Jays replace them with yellow pine resin, and to this day, he wanders around with weeds in his fur and yellow eyes, never ever satisfied with anything. So the theme of this story, the explicit one, can be seen on the last page. You have eyes, yet you do not see. You have ears, yet you do not listen. You have a nose, a mouth, and a sense of touch, yet all these do not enlighten you. An implicit theme that can be gathered from this tale is that do not want for things that you don't have. Be happy with your life and who you are. Okay, so now for a tale dark and grim, which was one of my favorites from our learning team. So first, a summary. Reader, beware, but if you dare, follow Hansel and Gretel as they run away from their own story and into 8 other scary fairy tales. They'll encounter witches and warlocks, hunters with deadly aim, and bakers with ovens that are just right for baking children. It may be frightening, but unlike those other fairy tales you know, these are true. So this book falls into the category of modern high fantasy because it could not take place in the real world. Some characters have magical powers, and the setting of the story is entirely imagined. Some other characteristics of modern fantasy that are in this book are magical happenings. Many of the characters actually do come back to life. Talking animals. There are 3 crows that talk and help Johannes in the beginning and the twins towards the middle/end. There's a travels to different world. Hansel travels to hell and back. And magical beings. There's witches, warlocks, dragons, and devils. Through all the gore and violence and the death, this book does actually send a really positive message to the readers, even though it may not look like that when you start reading it. The explicit themes of the book are there is a wisdom in children, a kind of knowing, a kind of believing that we as adults do not have. And this is found on page 245. And also on page 3. For in life, it is in the darkest zones that one can find the brightest beauty and the most luminous wisdom. So the implicit theme of this book that I drew was have the courage and strength to slay your own dragons. Persevere even when life and situations become so tough that they almost seem too difficult to control. I really like those messages, and this is part of the reason that I like this book so much. So this book is culturally generic. It doesn't hold any diverse perspective, even though the main characters are twins. That's not really the focus of the story. And for my ELA artifact, I chose to do the point of view worksheet. It discusses the point of view of the narrator, which is my favorite part of the entire book. I love how lifelike and opinionated he is about his own book. So, let's go. Okay, so the proof that the point of view of the narrator actually exists can be first established in the foreword. He introduces the book and his opinion on the fairy tales. When he talks throughout the rest of the book, the text is in the same type as it is in the foreword, bold, which can be seen right here, and I'm also going to read you a little excerpt from the beginning. So, once upon a time, fairy tales were awesome. I know, you don't believe me. I don't blame you. A little while ago, I wouldn't have believed it myself. Little girl in red capes skipping around the forest, awesome? I don't think so. But then I started to read them. The real grim ones. Very few little girls in red capes in those. Well, there's one, but she gets eaten. So another example of proof that the narrator's point of view actually exists is that the narrator talks in first person when the rest of the stories are in third person. So on page 14, for example, he says, "Now, my young readers, I know just what you're thinking." Now you know for sure, if you didn't know before from the foreword, that the narrator is truly talking. So the last proof of the narrator that I'm going to share with you is on page 237. He says, "I'm sorry, before I tell you the very, truly, absolutely end, I've got to interject one last time, for fun, or to help you, if I can, though I wouldn't count on it." So through the voice of the narrator himself, the author himself, the narrator is able to give the reader plenty of information. He warns of what is to come in the story. Now, you might want to close your eyes on page 102. He adds comic relief, like on page 74. Yeah, right. Oh, wait, did I say that out loud? He also adds various inserts of wisdom. And on page 122, yes, just like that, there's a certain kind of pain that can change you. Even the strongest sword, when placed in a raging fire, will soften and bend and change its form. So it is with Hansel. The fire of guilt and shame was just that hot. Trust me on this one. I know this from personal experience. I hope that you never will, but since you're a person, and therefore prone to making horrible, soul-splitting mistakes, you probably will one day know what this kind of guilt and shame feels like. And when that time comes, I hope you have the strength, as Hansel did, to take advantage of the fire and reshape your own sword. The next question was, how would this point of view shift affect that information? So the way this point of view would shift would be it becoming non-existent. So this would take a lot from the story. In all honesty, the book would have less literary merit without the author's point of view in it. Through the character of the author, the reader is exposed to a unique writing craft. There's also a lot of precise vocabulary used when the author is talking. Without the author's voice, the book would also have less of a positive reader response, I believe. There would be a lack of comedy in the novel, making it more terrifying read for readers. Without the author's voice, the book is just one bloody and horrifying act after the other. His voice kind of breaks it up and also kind of warns you of what's to come so you can get into the right mental state. He also inserts plenty of wisdom into the story, which would be non-existent without his view. So before I finish up, I have one last thing that I need to do. I have to compare and contrast the genres really fast. So ways in which they are alike. Both of them have special characters. There are witches and wizards and talking animals in both of them. They both have magic. There's the wizard dog story in Trickster, and witches and warlocks in A Tale Dark and Grim. In both, good triumphs over evil. In each tale in Trickster, good always wins, and in Tale Dark and Grim, the twins do defeat the dragon and become king and queen of the Kingdom of Grimm. So ways in which the two genres are different. In traditional fantasy, the characters are flat and static. None of the characters in Tricksters change their ways at the end of the stories, just like in Mao and the Birds. He's unsatisfied at the beginning, still unsatisfied at the end. However, in modern fantasy, the characters do change and they do develop. Throughout the story and their journey that Hansel and Gretel go on, they find the strength to forgive their parents. Another difference is in traditional fantasy, it explains natural phenomena. For example, how the alligator got his brown scaly skin, while modern fantasy is just a story. In traditional fantasy, no known author. These stories have been passed down over generations of generations. In modern fantasy, there is a known author, Adam Gidwitz. So also in modern fantasy, they have a more complex plotline and multiple themes and symbols. The plotline of The Tale of Dark and Grim is constantly changing with new curveballs being thrown at the twins, like the twins separating and nice people turning into be evil, and just a lot of things happen and develop. As you can see, lots of pages to let that happen. Whereas in traditional fantasy, there is a simple plotline, one theme, one symbol. Each story in Trickster is one-dimensional and ends with the theme being revealed. Then it's over. Thank you for watching!